My mother's full name was Patricia Margaret Downing till she married my dad, and then she was Patricia Margaret Dean, and then she married her second husband, Butch, and then she was Patricia Margaret Chamberlain.
She actually went by Patsy the whole time she was growing up.
Where was she born?
My mom was born in Atlanta, Georgia.
What's her birthday?
Her birthday is November 30th, 1932.
Before Franklin Delano Roosevelt, FDR was president, Herbert Hoover was president. It was right in the middle of the Great Depression. And actually, Roosevelt had just been elected, so he was the president-elect, but he hadn't started yet. So the election was in November 32, and Hoover already lost, but he was still president.
What were her parents' names?
Pauline Pierce Downing was her mom's name.
And then her dad's name was Joseph Raymond Downing.
My mom's parents, I think, met at church in the choir. My mom's mother's side of the family, the Pierces, I think they were from Detroit area. My mom's dad was from the South.
Was her family religious?
I know her father's family was Catholic.
I believe they went to church every weekend.
What did her parents do for a living?
Her dad was in the military.
I think my mom said her dad was a warrant officer in the Army.
I believe her mom didn't do anything except was a stay-at-home mom.
Did your mom have any siblings?
No, she was an only child. She was 6 or 7, and they were driving to Ohio. Her dad had just gotten a new position.
The only details I know is that my mom was in the back seat, her parents were in the front seat, and a drunk driver crossed the center line and hit their car head on.
And all she remembers is her dad being, back then they didn't have seatbelts. You didn't have seatbelts in cars. And she remembers her dad being pinned in. At the time she said she couldn't understand why he wasn't moving, but he was trying to reach his wife, who happened to be slumped on the floor of the front seat, and calling her name.
I know that my mom saw her mother, after the accident, lying in the front, kind of in the floor well, because the cars were bigger back then. We're talking like 1939 when this happened.
My grandmother was killed instantly.
He died a couple days later.
But my mom broke her arm, I know that, because she described that somebody, when they got her out of the car, she knew that there was something wrong with her arm, because her arm was killing her, because somebody just let her arm hang down and it was killing her, letting it hang down like that. And she said somebody did lift up her arm, put it across her chest, and she felt like instant relief, so she knew there was something broken, and she did break her arm. But I don't know if it was a priest or a family member or whatever, the way that they told my mom that her parents were dead, she was asking when she was going to see them again, and they said, you won't see them until you go to heaven. So she knew what that meant.
Can you talk to me about what happened after they died and what happened with your mom?
From my mom's recollection, she went to her grandparents for a few years, and then they sent her to a Catholic boarding school for girls.
I think she really adored the nuns. I think that's where she probably got her love as a family. And I remember when we were very little, we went down to Georgia to visit some of these nuns, just briefly. I mean, we weren't there probably an overnight or for the day or something, and I think that those were the ones that were the constants in her life until she got older.
Did your mom ever say whether she liked going to a boarding school, or?
She never really said that she didn't like it, but she missed her grandparents and she couldn't understand why they sent her away. But I think it was because they were elderly and they knew that she needed other opportunities to be away from them.
And then I think there was kind of a squabble about like life insurance and stuff too between the Downings and the Pierces. There was kind of a issue.
I know that her dad owed her mom's dad some money. And he wanted, I want to say it was a couple $1,000s or something. And he wanted that money when he died and took it from his life insurance policy.
But all I know is that she kind of ended up with the Downings eventually, and she lived with her Aunt Charlotte in Indianapolis. She moved up there, and I think that was her senior year of high school was when she first went to public school, at least since her parents died. My mom graduated high school in 1950 from Broad Ripple High School in Indianapolis, same high school David Letterman went to.
I mean, I think she had a terrible childhood, once her parents were gone, and I think until she moved to Indianapolis and lived with Aunt Mary and Aunt Charlotte, I think that's when things probably straightened out for her.
Did your mom have a best friend growing up?
I think she was really close with her cousin Joanne growing up.
What kind of stuff did they do together?
They went out on the lake swimming. She loved swimming and diving, and they would fish, and she just thought that was the best thing. And during the summertime when she would spend time with her cousins at the lake.
Joanne's mom and dad, Uncle Ed and Aunt Helen, wanted to adopt my mom, but the Downing side wouldn't hear of it. They did not want that to happen. Because they didn't approve of it, it didn't happen. I think they thought that Uncle Ed and Aunt Helen only wanted to do it for the money, because they wanted to get the insurance money. Because my mom was going to get, she's going to run into a little bit of money, not much, I'm sure, when she turned 18 or when she became an adult. I don't know what age, but she was going to get some. And I think that they thought that Uncle Ed and Aunt Helen were trying to get their money on it, their hands on that money. I think my mom would have had a totally different life had she been adopted by Uncle Ed and Aunt Helen. She would have had a sister, Joanne. She may not have ever gone to Indianapolis, and my parents never would have met.
What was your mom's job growing up?
She was a nurse.
Why did she want to go into nursing, you think?
Because one of the nuns that she had in boarding school was also a nurse. And she just thought it was something that she would really like.
For bright women, there were like two outlets if you really wanted to get a job and you wanted a career. It was either be a nurse or be a teacher. My mom went to Methodist Hospital nurses training in Indianapolis, which was the place where she finished high school, and she did her nurses training there. Because I think she graduated from nursing school in 1952, which would have been 2 years after she graduated from high school.
Can you talk to me about how your parents met?
His name was John Robert Dean.
They met in the hospital where my mom was a practicing nursing student and my dad was there for an appendicitis attack. And that's how they met. She was his nurse.
Because he was going to college down there, pharmacy school at Butler.
And she was actually engaged to somebody else.
And how did it go from nurse to relationship?
I want to say she went down to Florida to visit this boyfriend or something, and my dad hitchhiked down there to get her, or something. I'm not exactly sure, but they ended up getting together and, getting married.
My parents were married January 30th, 1954. They were married in Indianapolis. I think the wedding only had like a bridesmaid and a groomsman, one each. It was either once he got out of school or whatever, they'd move back to Chicago area. and my mom became part of the Dean family. And she lived with, my mom and dad lived with my dad's mother, my grandmother, for a time when they were just getting started. And I know there was a time that my mom and my grandma did not get along. It was like right when they first got married. He blew his money in different things. He spent his money. He got good stuff. And I remember my mom said that he got like a new Chevy, brand new car when they were just starting out. And my grandmother, acted like it was my mom's fault. And my mom stood up to her and told her she had nothing to do with it, and she was just as mad at my dad as her mother-in-law was. And I think, they had words a couple times like that. And after that, I think my grandmother respected my mom, and they got along great. Because my mom didn't have any parents, so that was the only really parent that parental figure in her life was her husband's mother.
How was your parents' relationship?
When I was a little girl, their relationship was perfect to me. I mean, I didn't know any different, but as I grew older, maybe 15, 16, they seemed to maybe drift apart a little bit. My dad worked all the time. My mom was only working part-time. And not really sure what happened. I always thought they were really close until all of a sudden they decided they were not going to be together anymore, which was devastating to the 5 children.
Can you talk to me more about the divorce?
My dad split in the fall of 1970. I think it was October 1970. So I would have been 8 and a half. I was in 3rd grade. Uncle Mike was in 5th grade. Aunt Cece was a freshman in high school. Bobby was a sophomore in high school, and Dee Dee was in 8th grade. I do remember my dad leaving before they got divorced when he split, and Uncle Mike and I were watching a Tarzan movie or something, and my dad getting up and he wanted, thought it was a big moment, saying, "Well, boys, see you later." And we didn't even take our eyes off the TV and just kind of like waved him goodbye. "See you, Dad."
Aunt Carol and I were old enough to know that something was going on and that my dad was hiding something, and that my mom knew what was going on but was really hurt by it. And I hope no child has to go through that again. It was a really hard thing for her 5 children. And Billy and Michael and Dee Dee were younger and didn't really know what was going on, but Carol and I were kind of snoops and kind of snooped around and figured it out.
But we found out after the fact that he'd been having an affair with somebody for quite a while.
How did your mom take it?
Not good. She was so taken, totally shocked by it. Absolutely shocked. And she was a mess for a long time. I remember because it was like right before the holidays. And it was just a terrible time for us kids.
When Mom and Dad got engaged, he gave her a Bible, and it was all in Latin. And he said, "These words will last as long as we live." And then she said, and then the Catholic Church went from Latin to English. And she thought that was some kind of sign that said, this isn't going to last.
Anyway, he moved out. They didn't get divorced, though, until like July 1971, that next summer. I even remember the dress my mom was wearing when she came up back from the courthouse. And she seemed cool about it. She almost seemed relieved. It's over. Even though she'd been crying, and it was really sad. Because I know, up till then, I had never heard my mom cry. And she just wailed. Oh my God, it was just so loud and so sad. And I know she called with some really close friends, the Moselles, because she was just so sad and didn't know what to do and was crying on the phone. I remember seeing her hold on to the phone. Henry came over And I think he basically put my mom to sleep, just put her in bed. And, I just remember her being on her own, and that's when she kind of started drinking. And, it just was bad. The drinking was bad. It was just so sad.
She never had a drinking problem until my dad left. And of course, at that time, I was like 15 years old. And I guess it was her way to cope with what had happened to her. She lost not only her husband, but her husband's family. And she had 5 children. And at the time, I remember one of her friends saying to me, "You've got to help your mom." And I said, "Well, who's going to help us?" How did she even get to this point? Except she was trying to soothe herself and forget about all the responsibility she had. That was a really hard time because she had never, ever had that problem before my dad left. So for her to get through that and get over it was a big milestone for her. And to this day, I don't know what I know why her 5 children are so close is because of her drinking problem.
I was embarrassed about her drinking. I was sad about it, but I still loved her, and I thought, I can understand why she does it, because she was just so heartbroken. I mean, she didn't have a family anymore because my grandmother really didn't have much to do with her anymore. When I was in 5th grade, so this would have been 2 years after they split up, my mom found out that my dad had gotten remarried and who he got remarried to. And then kind of all came together where my mom figured out that, okay, now I get it. He was, I'm sure, cheating on me with his second wife while we were married. And she kind of, came to the realization that that was the case because the woman was someone that he worked with.
How did it affect you think?
It made me feel like marriage was supposed to be forever, and I guess that's why I'm still married after almost 45 years. Like, you should make that commitment and stick to it no matter what. And I feel sad that my mom and dad didn't do that or didn't have the determination and gumption and just faithfulness to stay together for themselves and for their whole family.
How many children did your mom have?
My mom had 5 kids.
And can you go down the line?
Barbara Lynn, Carol Elizabeth, Diane Patricia, John Michael, William Allen.
Talk to me about how she picked your guys' names.
Bobby was named after a nun that she was very, very fond of. And Carol she just liked that name.
Carol's middle name is Elizabeth, which was her grandmother's middle name.
So when she had B and C, she thought Dee Dee ought to be D. And so and they just came up with Diane Patricia and used her name to. And Michael was always John Michael before he was ever. We were all John Michael until they finally had a boy. Just they loved that name.
And then William, and then Allen was Uncle Dick's middle name, so it was William Allen Dean.
She was a great mom. She was really involved with her kids. Bobby and Dee Dee and I were involved in a lot of stuff, band or choir. We were cheerleaders. I was in volleyball, and I don't know that my mom ever missed anything. She was always there at every one of those things, and she was the biggest support. She just loved being a mom.
She never screamed and yelled, never. She was not a screamer or a yeller.
How did she punish you guys?
She would, from when I was a little girl, I never remember my mom spanking me, but I remember her walking upstairs with a wooden spoon, like banging the wooden spoon on the stairs all the way up. And then when she would get up there, nothing would happen. It was just the threat of the wooden spoon. Nothing ever happened. And we knew we better behave or we were going to get the wooden spoon, but I never actually got the wooden spoon.
Oh, I do remember having nightmares, like night terrors, when I was really young, probably 5 or 6. And I remember waking up with my mom putting when I was having this like horrible dream or whatever, and she had like a washcloth and I was laying in her lap, across her lap. I do remember that. I remember she read to us, and I can still smell like the cigarette smoke because she would be smoking cigarettes while she was reading to us. It didn't bother me.
When I was in kindergarten, there were 2 kids younger than me, and then Billy, your dad was born in March of my kindergarten year. But and then Bobby was a year ahead of me in 1st grade, and I can remember coming home from kindergarten because we just went in half day, and I had a morning class, and there were a bunch of kids in our area, and so there were a lot of people that could drive and stuff, and it would be tough for my mom to drive when she had all these little kids, let's face it. She had 3, under kindergarten age. And I can remember coming home from kindergarten and having lunch with her by myself, no kids around, and her reading me a chapter of a book every day and laying down with me till I fell asleep. And she always held my hand, and I'd wake up and she would never be there, because obviously she got up with the other kids. But I feel like it was great that I had that time with her by myself and there was nobody around. So I'm guessing everybody was down for naps or something. But I think that was part of me loving to read now, is because she always read to me.
I can remember one year we went on vacation to this little town called Twin Lakes, Wisconsin. And we all stayed it was a cabin on a lake, and it was the 5 kids and my mom and dad. And I remember we were out of like a little rowboat and everything, and my dad took my brothers into town. I don't know, and you could walk there. And they came back, and my brothers' heads were shaved bald. And my mom said, "What in the heck happened?" And my dad says, "Well, a haircut was only 50 cents. And my mom says, "What did you do to their heads?" He goes, "I got their haircut." She goes, "Never again." She was so angry about that. She was like, "Oh my gosh, you can't do this to your kids." And the rest of the vacation, your dad wore a hat on his head like a stocking cap the rest of the week. He wouldn't take his head off because his head was shaved for 50 cents.
One story about my mom was when she was asking me for Christmas present ideas. And the only thing I wanted was, I told her, I like some long sleeve polo shirts, either long sleeve polo shirts or long sleeve t-shirts. I know I said something with long sleeves. And I also said I wanted an Al Green CD, like Al Green's best favorite hits or whatever. And my mom got all the details all mixed up, and she was at the music store she said she knew it was Al Green, but she thought that the name of the album was Long Sleeves. I guess she wrote down on the list Al Green CD, and then above that was like long sleeve. That was all it was, long sleeve. So she thought that was the name of the album. She was like, "I know that's what he said." And she kind of got into an argument with whoever it was that she was telling me on the phone. I was like, thought it was hilarious, and she thought it was hilarious.
Talk about how she met Butch.
I don't know how my mom got reacquainted with Butch, but she knew his parents. And all I know is that they met up at, I think somebody fixed them up at the St. Mary's Mardi Gras, which is like a thing that they did right before Lent started at the church that we went to, St. Mary's, where they had gambling and drinks, and it was like a fundraiser for the church. And I think classroom at the school at the at this church was like it was a different gambling table or whatever, and a different drink, I think. Anyway, my mom would go to that with some other neighbors or whatever, and somebody fixed them up with Paul and Lucille's son, who's younger than my mom, like 10 to 12 years younger than my mom. And I guess they hit it off. I didn't know anything about it, but because the first time I met him, it was like the first date after this like setup, where he just came over on a Sunday, and we had just returned from Indianapolis. I think we were celebrating Joey's first birthday. It had to have been, because it was like March of 1980, and that's the only reason why we would have been down in Indianapolis for Joey's first birthday. So we got home that night, and this dude walks up, and I could see him through the front window with a cowboy hat on, and he knocks on the door and asks for my mom. And I was taken aback because my mom never had any dates. So they left. I mean, I think my mom must have introduced me to him, but they split. And they went to go have coffee and something at a place. And like 3 weeks later, my mom moved out. She moved out of the apartment the condo that Mike and Dee Dee and I and her lived. And she moved in with Butch, her new boyfriend. Anyway, they ended up getting married that summer before I went away to college, right after I graduated from high school. And Mike and Dee Dee and I stayed at the condo in Mokina, and my mom lived with Butch in Frankfurt in a condo.
How do you think their relationship was?
I think the first couple years were kind of rough for them. I mean, they had a lot of situations they had. I mean, he had children, she had children. You know, they had his children lived with them, her children lived with them, and I think it was kind of rough for the first couple years, but I think they finally worked it out. And I think when Mom finally passed away, I think they were a very happily married couple for 32 years, and I'm glad that they found each other and they made each other happy. And I remember Butch saying to me one day, like, how am I going to be comfortable with somebody sitting in that chair across the room with me and I don't even really have to talk to her, I just know she's here.
Did your mom have any hobbies?
She read a lot. She loved to read. She's the smartest person I knew. I can remember being in the car with her, and she always listened to the National Public Radio or something. She was always listening to news and stuff, and I think that's probably one of the reasons why she was so smart.
Like, if you wanted to play Trivial Pursuit, you wanted Mom on your team because she knew everything. She knew a little bit about everything, and she would know the answers to everything. Like, yeah, Mom, you want to be on my team. Or even Scrabble, or any kind of game, you wanted Mom on your team.
She was a whiz at crossword puzzles. She liked to do the crossword puzzle and read the paper. She's like an old-time person that read the paper cover to cover, at least Joey at Herald News anyway, and she'd joke about how stupid it was. But she liked to do the crossword puzzles.
She loved to needlepoint cross stitch. She loved to play piano. She loved to bake. She loved to cook. She loved just spending time with her kids and being involved in all their activities.
How did she get involved in music?
When she was in boarding school, she had a beautiful singing voice, and she won a contest playing piano and singing on the radio, and that's what really got her into it.
But I know she played the piano. She learned it on a piece of cardboard, a keyboard that either she did or one of the nuns did at boarding school.
Why do you think she got into piano?
She had a knack for music. She had a really good voice. You know, she just had a natural talent, I think, for music, period.
Music was her thing, you know, which made us all be part of music growing up, whether it was in band or choir.
What kind of music did your mom like?
She liked pop music, you know, of her time, I think. And she kind of liked some of the easy listening pop music of the 70s, I know. But, you know, we had a piano in our house, and we had like a book of songs. And it was like really old songs. I mean, like standards from like the 20s and 30s, you know, Jeepers Creepers and stuff like that. And my mom would play that stuff on the piano, so I kind of knew all these old Cole Porter songs and stuff.
Can you talk to me about your mother's fears?
My mom hated thunderstorms. Whenever there was a thunderstorm, we had to go in the crawl space and say our Fathers and Hail Marys.
Did she have a hero in life? Someone she looked up to?
She loved her Aunt Charlotte and her Aunt Mary, and they helped her throughout all her life, you know, after her mom and dad died. I would say those two would be her heroes.
What do you think the hardest thing she ever had to do was?
I would have probably said going on with her life without her parents, you know, not having a family. But I don't think she's too young to remember. But I think it was probably overcoming my dad leaving her, you know, and facing everybody. I can't tell you how many people would say, "We thought you guys had the perfect family. We thought you were the perfect family." And here, our parents are getting divorced, you know. Even my Aunt Esther said that, you know, about my parents. So I think it just, and then my mom to think she had the perfect family too. And then to have to turn around and face it, you know, that it wasn't so perfect. That was probably the hardest thing she ever had to do.
What do you think people need to most know about your mom?
Most people need to know about my mom that she was really, really smart, but she wasn't pompous about it. She wasn't like a jerk about it. She just was inherently intelligent. And I loved talking to her when she talked about certain things because she was very knowledgeable. And she did love her kids. I think she loved them equally. She had a different way to love all of us. She felt differently about all of us, but she loved all of us. I know she did. And she did have a really good sense of humor. But she was not one to wake up on the wrong side of the bed and be grump. Not at all. Every day. She didn't come in, rough, you know. She just was not like that.
Is there anything that you wish you could tell her now or ask her?
It's funny because once they pass away and then you think, oh, I gotta call him, tell him this, and you forget you can't do that.
I hope that she knows how I felt about her. I think she did before she died. I mean, she died a few days before Christmas, and I sang Christmas carols to her on Christmas Eve and Christmas Day, and she is still awake and alert at that time, and I know that she loved Christmas, and I'm glad that, you know, I'm glad that I was there in the same town with her and able to do those things for her.